Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Watertown City Council meeting of Monday, June 17th, 2019. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Albertson?
Here.
Bueller? Danforth?
Here.
Lallam?
Here.
Manti?
Here.
Roby?
Here.
Solom?
Here.
Thorson?
Here.
Billhauer?
Here.
Y?
Present.
Thank you.
All right. I can see that the chambers are full of people who may want to speak about one of our agenda items tonight. And I want to thank you all for coming. An engaged community will help our council to make correct decisions. That's really important. And my goal is to ensure that everything gets done in a reasonable amount of time for everyone involved. So with that, we'll get started. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Moved by Bueller, second by Lallam. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 2 is a public comment. This is a time reserved for anyone who would like to make a public comment to step forward and do so. Please state your name in the microphone for the record before making your comment. And if your comment is related to an agenda item, please wait until that agenda item is taken up by the council. Is anyone here who cares to speak? You can come forward and come up to the microphone and say your name. And if this is about one of our agenda items, we'll wait for that. There's right there at the desk. There's a microphone at the seat. No, that I'll call you for that. That will be very shortly. Anyone here for just a general comment? See none, we'll move on. Item number 3 is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Billhauer, second by Manti. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, item number 4 is the one you're looking for. This is the second reading of Ordinance number 1906 to amend the district zoning map of the city of Watertown, South Dakota for property generally located north of the sailboat landing on Lake Kempesca and legally described as lots 21 through 27, Block 2 of Lake Ridge Addition from R1 Single Family Residential District to C3 Highway Commercial District, subject to all planning requirements, including the requirement to replat into conforming lots prior to the effective date. And I will look for a motion second for approval. A motion by Manti, second by Bueller. And this is the time for the public hearing. So have some rules, though, because I know there's a lot of people that want to talk about this. I will allow half an hour for public testimony. And in order to make sure that everyone has a chance to state their position, I will ask each of you to limit your time at the podium to a minute or so to clearly state your opinion. Please do not repeat explanations which have already been given. And come to the microphone, you say your name before giving your opinion. And this is not a debate. Please do not come back to the podium once you have had your time unless you've been summoned by one of the council members or me. And so I will now open the public hearing. And I'll start by relating some written testimony which we received. We did get a letter from Deanne Ellison Rohde of 264 North Lake Drive. She was strongly opposed to the rezone due to safety hazards from increased traffic, light pollution, and other toxic pollutants. This will open the gates to more zone changes, only 2 other small C3 zones. This area is huge by comparison, and this could be a disastrous precedent. We also got a letter from Jan Tate of 292 and 296 Arizona Avenue. She objects to any commercial development on the property in question. We also had several phone call testimonies given. One from Roy Walsh, directly west of this application. He said he's in favor and wants to do the same thing with his property if this is approved. We had a call from Marlo Kleppel of 258 North Lake Drive, who was opposed, and a phone call from David and Angela Dingzer of 276 North Lake Drive, who were opposed because of safety for their children, and they want to preserve the seclusion and privacy that their lot provides. So, that being done, is there anyone else who would like to speak about this issue? So, could I see a show of hands, because we have two issues here. How many are here for the rezoning, want to speak about the rezoning? Please raise your hand. Okay, you can begin coming forward and have a seat at the microphone and state your name. For the rezoning. No, either way, for or against. It's speak about the rezoning.
I'm Marla Stagel, and I have a property on 274 North Lake Drive. I'm definitely against it, and I'm wondering what it will do, if it will ruin the value of our properties and our taxes. And this little service road that we have that goes by us is like a street that would be in front of your homes here in town. And also wondering where they would get their access to the property. Is the DOT going to give them access off Highway 20? On Highway 20? I don't, we're not hearing back anything on that, so I don't have any idea. And if we change that to the commercial, we would have no say about what could be done or what could not be done. And once it's changed, it's there forever. And I'm wondering about if it'll be a lot of noise and a lot of extra traffic that we wouldn't have. Roger won't hear the traffic because he's down further on the other side behind the trees. My driveway lines up right with this property. And I feel that we have had everything so nice and quiet and stuff there, and that putting something like that in is just not the right thing. And they are not telling us what they would do with the property, either Roger or Roy. Why do they want the property? Are they buying it and then selling it for somebody else to build on it, or what? But anyway, we have nothing to say about it. And I don't know where you people live or anything, and I don't know you, but I'd be willing to bet that you would not like to wake up in the morning and have that traffic and all of that in your front yard and using your driveway. We have had this piece of property since 1964. It's good and quiet residential area, and we want it to stay that way. If it came in your street in town, you would not like it either. And I don't know, does this go just for Roy's land and Rogers? And then does it go for the slough on the other side? clear up to the water tower? Or is it just these few lots right here that we're discussing, that we're talking about?
We're only discussing the lots for which we have an application.
Okay? And it doesn't seem that that's something that we should have out there. And the people that were living there do not want it. And the people that came forward before are on the other side of the lake. Well, let them get a lot over on the other side and put up some of that stuff. I don't think they should be able to tell us what we need to have in front of our houses. And there's places there to buy gas. The airport, there's a place right at the airport road, and now North Shore, whatever they're going to do, and Compesca Lodge. So I don't feel we need to have a convenience store or the whatever. I don't know. He isn't telling us. We don't know. It's hard to make a decision on something when you don't have the facts. And we have no idea what this part would be for. When my folks bought that land, they said that that was wetlands, and we never needed to worry about anybody doing anything with it. And I'm sure at that time, there weren't the laws that whoever bought it, I'm sure they didn't have to jump through any hoops to get this fixed or that fixed or this paper signed or that paper signed. And I'm sure back then that wasn't an issue. But now that it is an issue for us, we definitely hope that you will see that this isn't an option. They don't tell us what they're doing. And my understanding is the city doesn't have a plan for it either. And I think it's premature to try and do something with that when the city doesn't know what they're going to do with it and some of that. So I just hope that we can solve this problem.
Thank you, Mrs. Daigle.
Yeah.
As far as the access goes, Heath, do you know, has an application been made for access to DOT?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There have been discussions with the DOT as far as what they would approve here. I don't know if formal application has been made, but the DOT has indicated the appropriate dimension from the intersection of Highway 20 and what would be Martin Street and North Lake Drive where they intersect. And the urban planner's in here as well. If I could defer the exact dimension, I believe that they gave would mean that it would have to be a shared drive amongst the applicant's land and the property to the west of them. 600 feet? It would be 600 feet west of that intersection, which would place it as a shared drive between the applicant's property and the property to the west.
Okay, thank you. So basically at the end of the hatched area on the map would be 600 feet. So the DOT would probably, they haven't received a formal application nor have they issued a permit, but they would entertain access off of the highway.
Off from the highway,
Yes.
not on
But
our,
the city,
not on our
this
street.
this isn't the concern tonight, though.
Yeah.
And, thank you. Next. Sure, Councilman Roby.
You might want to explain what it says under here, where it's the condition, it was passed by the planning commission with a condition. Would you just somebody maybe just explain what that means and what that all entails for the group?
Okay, the condition, if you can see on this map, this property has already been platted into lots which do not meet the district requirements for the commercial zone. So they would be non-conforming lots. So before this would become effective, the plat would have to be completed making conforming lots to the C3 zone. That was a condition placed by the Plan Commission for approval. So if it passes, then the city will hold on to publishing it until the plat materials have been submitted and approved, and then publish the passage of the ordinance. And the ordinance does not become effective until 20 days after it's publicly noticed in the newspaper. So will be published. So we'll wait if it does pass. So, okay, sir, go ahead. Please state your name.
Marlo, Marlo Claypool, 258 North Lake Drive. I bought that property a few years ago as a place where I could retire, enjoy the lake and the solitude of the lake, and that will disappear if this goes through. I hope you will honor the concerns and wishes of the residents, homeowners, and people who want to buy a home on Lake Campesca and not have to worry about a business in their front yard. Now, this would be right in my front yard out there, and that really concerns me. And you as elected officials who also represent the residents and homeowners of this area and can set precedent now by allowing a business to be started in someone's front yard, or you can preserve the quality and solitude of living on the lake without the concerns of a business being built in your front yard. It's just that precedent that you're setting. Anybody at any time can come along in a residential district and say, hey, we have a lot here, let's rezone that so I can start a business. And that really bothers me. And again, I didn't buy that house and pay taxes out there to have a business in my front yard. So I hope you will just honor the people and the taxpayers that live out there and listen to their concerns. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, Council. I'm Brian Brandrate. I also bought a property out at the lake, and there's nothing like living at the lake. I as well, I want to retire at the lake. However, I'm extremely excited about some things starting to happen on our lake because I feel like our lake really is so underutilized. It's such a great asset. I mean, I have friends that come to my house all the time, and they love coming there because there's virtually nowhere to go on our lake. I mean, we have North Shore coming, we have Doris's deal there, we have Conda's thing on the south side, but it's not a lot for our entire community. I get where they're coming from here, but it's no different than if there was one hardware store in town here. Nobody wants competition, nobody wants it across from them. I have a house at 60 North Lake Drive. If they're across from me, it is what it is. I'm really excited. I don't think it's going to ruin the lake just because we get a few people coming and going. Just because if they have a business doesn't mean they can be recluse. I mean, they still have to have the same rules and regulations we have to have on every street corner in Watertown. There's some really good things that could happen out at the lake. I think we should kind of maybe think that maybe this could be something better than something worse. I think it's something to get really excited about. Thanks.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Council, Kyle Lallam, I'm with Haugen Nelson Realty. I spoke in favor of this at the Plan Commission, so I'll try and make my presentation succinct here and quick and not repeat anything. You're talking Dolly Land, R1 zoning. There's very few different zoning categories around Lake Campesca right now. So here's Dolly's Land, the piece it's not showing up here. The piece that's in question is down here on the right. All of the land to the north of Highway 20, you can see on this thing here, that's all zoned R1, including the photo on the left, which is LaFramboise Construction. So you've got construction stuff there, all in our R1 zoning. So unfortunately, Campesca is just landlocked like any other lake in the region. So you've got Campesca Lodge, that's got a C2 zoning as indicated on the photo on the right. Multiple properties on either side of those of that facility have sold in the last 12, 15 years. Hasn't negatively impacted property values. It increases the tax base by having commercial zoning and new construction going around. You talk about North Shore, that's been referenced as well. North Shore was on the open market for 224 days in 2014 and 15, sat vacant until a businessman came forward and decided to bring it forward and make it to what it was. So you've got a C2 zoning there, completely surrounded by R1, also backed up to Highway 20. You talk about the prop location over there. Prop's got a multitude of zonings in there. You got R1, you've got C2, you've got R2, you've got ag, you've got PUDs out there. So there's a multitude of zoning there. You also have an industrial zone piece of ground around Lake Kempesca. You've got I-2, which is where Casino Speedway is. I won't go into great detail on the phone calls I'm sure you receive on that, but it does pay and does bring tax dollars into Watertown, and it is completely surrounded by R1 zoning as well. And then going back to the H2020 piece, you know, this I took these right off the Community Foundation's pages. 2,200 people, respondents of the community, over 10% of our community, talked in favor of the H2020 initiatives. And one of them was the fact that, like Mr. Brandwright says, the common responses was that Lake Kempesca is frequently cited as the community's greatest natural asset, but also the most underutilized. And so in looking at potential strategic actions, that's what this group is referencing here today. I mean, the unfortunate part is we don't have a comprehensive land use plan for Lake Kempesca, but neither have many of the other lake communities in the Midwest and in the North. I've got, you've got Okoboji, you've got Grand Marais, and you also have Brainerd, Minnesota, all residential properties surrounded by commercial. I speak in favor of this. When you talk about increased construction and commercial properties pay a higher real estate taxes, so that won't negatively impact the real estate tax valuations on these properties. And you talk about anytime there's continued development in an area, it always increases property valuations. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Aaron Hansen, and my wife and I, we live at the lake as well. One of the things about living at the lake in Watertown is that it is a little bit noisy at times. We don't mind that at all. That's part of it. And we enjoy the fact that other people are enjoying the lake. That's great. If we didn't like that, we would have selected a lake. And there's hundreds of glacial lakes in our area. You guys are all aware of that. And many of them don't have anyone living on those lakes. And if that were something we were concerned with, we probably would have done that. We're very much in favor of it. We want to increase accessibility to the lake. I think that's important for people who live in town or maybe live out of town to have that same accessibility or close to accessibility that we enjoy. You know, as far as if the property were across from our house, we'd be just fine with that. In fact, there is a property just across the street from our house that could potentially be developed and rezoned commercial, and something very similar to what's being proposed tonight could happen, and we'd fully support that as well. If we weren't in favor of it and we wanted to make sure that that didn't happen, I'm sure that myself and other neighbors would all pool together and potentially buy that land and ensure that didn't happen. I'm assuming that they could, neighbors in this area could probably do the same thing if they were concerned about that, and they could do whatever they want with the property, plant trees or whatever that is to ensure that it isn't developed. So to increase, you know, our tax base, I think we need to consider this, and this is just one piece of that. But anything that can enhance our community, I think we need to consider. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sir, could you tell us what your address is, please?
Yep, 1082 South Lake Drive.
Okay, thank you.
The old Sunnyside edition.
My name is Mike Lawrence. I've been working on Lake Kempesca projects. I've been going to meetings and things for many years now. I spoke at the planning zoning, so I won't touch on a lot of that things. I just want to touch on some things that people have came to me as far as uses. Uses in the C3, that's what things that people are worried about. I wanted to touch base kind of on the existing campgrounds. Campgrounds are only allowed in the C3 commercial highway district. We have how many campgrounds around our lake currently? So we are already having the same uses in a C3 in 3 different areas in our lake. If you take a look at, let's say, we have North Shore, we have this piece of property, we have Mr. Dunn's land that's across from Compesca Lodge. That piece of land has been approved and passed this board as a C3 highway commercial use. He just didn't plat it. So right in line with this, it's already been approved C3 highway commercial. I think you got to take that into consideration when you take this piece of land and say, well, this one can't make it because it's touching a highway, and this one can, and this one can over here, and our campgrounds that touch the lake, we can have that sort of use, C3, but we can't do it in this specific area. When you go to these meetings and you look around the lake, there isn't very many pieces of land that we can utilize for commercial usage. When you think about a piece of property that's between a boat landing and a C3 highway commercial highway, it's probably, like I said, I empathize with these people. I really do. But if we want this, which I go to these meetings and we talk these things over and everybody says that we should do it, we have to find places for these. And without having an empty lake, it's really tough. So that's all I have to say tonight.
Thank you.
Mike, what's your address?
640 North Lake Drive.
Council, my name is JC Stafford. I live on 794 North Lake Drive. Contrary to opposition tonight, my husband and I did not purchase our lake home in pursuit of quiet solitude. I grew up on many Minnesota lakes with my family on recreational lakes with expansive commercial property. And why I loved it is I would wake up to the sound of jet skis and boats and kids laughing and screaming, learning how to ski and tube, and I would go to sleep with the sound of nightlife. And to me, that was what a lake was. And I was excited to be part of that growth on this lake as like a young family moving to Watertown. I do believe that I like having the idea of an aesthetically pleasing commercial property, and I do believe that there's due process to making it as safe as possible for the residents. And I don't expect that we're going to be inviting in like LA airport traffic into that area. I think it's going to be reasonable. I also own a business in town, Coco and Finn. It's a women's retail store. And from an economic business standpoint and as a marketing entrepreneurial degree or someone with that degree, I really believe that, or I know that local and especially rural communities are taking such a hit considerably with online retail and just people moving to maybe bigger communities. And from somebody who's been involved in public service and seen lake communities thrive on the lakes they do have and utilizing them well, I can see how the influx and retention of population, what that can do for your community. I know it's really important, and I know we can make it happen. And again, as we've talked about, I can empathize with the people who probably moved here with a different intent for what those locations would be used for. But, you know, I see so many friends of mine and young families who flood out of this town on weekends or on celebrations to go to Okoboji or go to Detroit Lakes or go to Alexandria, because those are what they think of as recreational fun lakes. And I know that we can retain these people and keep these tax dollars in town. And I don't know about you guys, but I like paying sales tax. It means that my community is growing, and I want to be able to pay more with my business, honestly. So if we can make this happen, you guys, I would be so excited about it. And again, like Brian spoke to, if it's across from my property, I will be happy to know that more people have access to the lake, and I know that the city does what they can to make it safe and accessible, and so it's not such an interruption to the people living on the lake, but I think it's an exciting opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Gary Van Hill, 272 North Lake Drive. I'm very new to this area. Actually just bought the house a little over a year ago. Love it. Not really saying I'm for it or against it, but I've been in business myself a long time. I've rezoned properties. I've never heard of where you rezone a property without intent of what it's going to be used for, where people are just supposed to swallow and say, okay, they can do whatever they want to do there. When I bought the house at 272, I was told how much money I could spend on it to remodel it. I couldn't even just remodel it the way I wanted to. I could only spend X amount of money to remodel it. So if I'm not trying to change the zoning of the house, I'm not trying to make it commercial, why would you be so tough on an R1 when they just want to remodel their home, but let somebody rezone a property to a C3 and not even tell the residents around it what it is they're going to do with it? And that's all I have to say. Just like I said, if I knew what it was going to be, I wouldn't even say I'd be against it. I just can't imagine zoning a property and then let that person maybe sell it to somebody else that could do whatever they wanted and not make it clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I do want to state for the record that I did write a written letter to each council member, and I believe it was all noted that they did receive it. So I have a number of concerns. It's Brian Pellish. I live at 320 North Lake Drive. One of my first concerns is this property, from a street frontage standpoint, has 100% recreation trail on the east side and on the south side. So we talked about the DOT's permission to come in from the north, but that doesn't stop them from putting in unlimited number of street cuts from whatever they would possibly build on this property, which was going to turn our recreation trail into 4th Avenue's recreation trail, which has over 18 sidewalks interruptions with driveways. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about what potentially could be used for this property, but we have no idea what that is because it's not being disclosed. It's come before the Planning and Zoning Commission and been turned down because they wanted to build storage sheds on this location. And the discussion that we've heard most recently is that's another option that they're still looking at. Storage sheds create a lot of traffic, but we don't know because, as the last person that spoke said, there's been no information provided. I am concerned about light spillage depending on what type of commercial property you put in. That's going to create an awful lot of light wash that we see around a lot of convenience stores in the evening. And when I moved to the lake almost 30 years ago, I did my homework. I looked to see if I was in R1. I didn't want anything to do with being near commercial property. And that's what I was moving into by my choice. Lastly, I've seen this property a couple times come before the Planning and Zoning Commission because I was on that board for 12 years, and it was soundly denied for the reasons that the people are talking about tonight, and I think you should make that decision again. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? I'll give you a minute here.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing us tonight. I have a few questions for you. I understand there is a... Ma'am, could you please state your name? I'm sorry, get closer.
Name.
Oh, yes, of course I can. Juanine Polly, 268 North Lake Drive. And while this property is described as north of the sailboat landing, it is actually north of all of the houses down to the corner, which is about 278 North Lake Drive, which would be the accurate description. So it's north of my home. I understand there is a lake plan being developed, comprehensive lake plan. Could anybody speak to that, please? What the name of that is and what the intention is?
There's a Lake Kempesca master plan that isn't quite done yet, but it's supposed to be a document for the community to use for guidance and what sort of uses and improvements that the community wants to see at the lake.
Okay.
It isn't done yet.
Okay, I think you said that you were expecting it any day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how much have you paid to have this plan done, the city council and the government and whomever else gave you a grant? What's the value of that?
I'd have to look it up.
Does anybody know? Can anybody look that up for me? what the cost that the citizens
I
are
think we budgeted
paying for?
So, Juanita, I think we budgeted 50,000 for that plan.
Okay. Okay. So we have used $50,000 for a plan that you say you've wanted to do for a very long time. And it's almost ready. And it's looking in the long term, about what you want to do with the lake. And this request has come at this moment, right before the plan is being looked at. I do understand from you, Sarah, that it's going to take time, but isn't that what this is about? Making really good decisions about what we do at the lake? A C3 property can be anything. There is nothing that says this is going to bring in tourism, that this will be a strong tax base, that this will be aesthetically appropriate. There is nothing in the approval that there's true about that. Now, I've heard about we need to have a C2 or C3 lake commercial. Even if we looked at a C2, that has to do with the residents. But right now, the choices you're making are something that we, the people who have done this plan, have no control over. My understanding, and I'm sorry that the people who are doing the plan, but when Vanessa was here, she said, we've scheduled this for an open space. And it's an open space because we're looking at all of the lands that flood. And we don't want to be doing development. Even though this one is higher, we don't want to be doing development in those places. It flooded this year. Not only did it flood, but our sewers didn't work. We weren't to use our sewers. So you're looking at putting something, any kind of property there, that could, in fact, deal with the infrastructure. I've heard many things talked about what this might be. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be commercial development. I'm not saying people shouldn't enjoy the lake. In fact, we have Memorial Park and City Park and Sandy Shores and all kinds of places for people to go. The sailboat landing, which you're talking about being across from, is gravel. The beach is rock. There is one dock. There is one very utilitarian toilet. And now we're talking about that being a cost to the city, but somebody making their commercial property, using that potentially, because they've talked about a marina, as access, a business using that as direct access for that purpose, as well as that's often very busy with people in the community who want to come out and fish. There is no light. Mr. Culhane asked, well, what about the light pollution? There's one light in front of the boat ramp. There is no light pollution now. There is no sound pollution. I can appreciate people who've lived on other lakes. I know that there's sounds, but it's different when you're talking about a commercial property in that place where you have no idea what will happen to it. And you have a plan that you've paid for, that the city has put effort into, that people had public hearings and made comments. And now it's almost ready for consideration, and up to you to make excellent choices and move that along. And a decision seems to be premature, I think is what someone said, that it's premature for this time. Let's look at the entire plan. Let's make a good plan that everyone can use. One final point, the properties that are C3 now were there before any of the houses were there. They've been there 60, 70 years. So when people are choosing to put their house on either side of Lake Shore, Lunkers, North Shore, or pack their houses in by the prop, those are choices they're making now with existing property. That's very different than changing a property now that has existing properties by it. I see that as quite a different thing. Just like you to think about that. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I certainly hope we can implement the plan that's being developed and that people have put so much effort into.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Vanessa Victor with Infrastructure Design Group. I also live at 196 North Lake Drive. I was a part of the team for the Lake Compesca Master Plan. Our total fee for that was about $85,000. Sorry I'm late. We were actually having a meeting to finalize that before I came today. Part of our scope for this project was actually to look at the planning and zoning around the lake. When it was all said and done, we did come up with some recommendations, and the lake is a different entity, and it's time that we start looking at it as a different entity. And we recommended having a lake residential zoning and a commercial lake zoning to try to appease some concerns. We also, all of our recommendations were based off of a survey that was sent out to interested parties. And while previous surveys have shown that people want more amenities at the lake, we found that to be true, but people also did not want it in their backyard, as you're seeing today. So in our final comprehensive use plan for the lake, we did not include this as a commercial zoned area because of the floodplain and because it is highly residential. And we focused most of the amenities on secondary development away from single-family housing. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? We need to wrap it up soon.
My name is Joanne Rohde. I grew up on Lake Compesca when I was just a teenager. Lake Compesca means an awful lot to me. We've had three houses on Lake Compesca in my family. In fact, we love Lake Compesca so much, my daughter wrote a song about growing up on Lake Compesca. Compesca memories go pretty deep. There's nothing like sleeping to the waves and on and on and on. Many people have given that to their kids, and they sing it because they grew up on Lake Compesca. It means so much to so many people, and I am one of them. One of my concerns, I think one of the biggest ones, is we don't know what it can be. I think that unknown is what scares a lot of us, wondering what could it be if they sell it or whatever, and we have no control over that. I think everybody has said so many things. I'm just kind of echoing. It's been so peaceful, just so very peaceful out there, and you kind of hate it to stop. I have noticed at times that people will wander down from the sailboat landing right through our yards, and that concerns me. It wasn't a lot, but it could be a lot. And, that is a concern. Safety to me is really important. And the lights, the noise, we want it peaceful. And so many have said everything I was going to say, so I don't know what else to say except that I hope you consider our way of living at the lake, and we don't want it to change. And like I say, they have said most everything, so I'm just echoing it and adding a little bit to it. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, seeing none, one more, okay.
Hello, my name is Colt Rushink. I live at 794 North Lake Drive. I am for the rezoning of this piece of property. I'm excited about the way this community is growing, and I think in order to retain young families like myself and future families, to keep them in this community and keep this community growing, this has to be one step towards that. It's one step of many that need to be done, but we have to start somewhere. That being said, I don't think that we need to ignore the certain aesthetically pleasing buildings that should be built there. I mean, we have too many pole buildings in this town already. I think that should be something that needs to be considered. when this is being developed. And yeah, I think it's something that's gonna grow, and it's gonna make Lake Compresca more of an attraction for other people other than just the residents. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, last call. Anyone else? All testimony being taken. This hearing on the rezoning is now closed, and the council may discuss the issue. And I would like to start by asking our city engineer, Heath Von Eye, if he has any information to add.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll give a brief synopsis here. Obviously, this is a petition to rezone. This is the public hearing and second reading of the ordinances before the council tonight. This action has passed the Planning Commission on May 23rd on a vote of 6-1, recommending approval to the City Council. That final approval, of course, resting on the City Council's decision. The other facts of the case, the currently is generally described as being north of the sailboat landing, as was indicated, but is legally described as lots 21 through 27 of Block 2, Lake Ridge Edition. And the rezone application is to zone the property from the current R1 single-family residential to C3 Highway Commercial District. Depending on how the discussion goes and what information the council would like, I do have a list of the approved C3 uses that I can put up, along with the conditional uses that fall underneath that zoning district. And I also wanted to touch on a couple of the questions that arose just for informational purposes and facts regarding the case. Access onto any city streets would be reviewed at the time of development and approved according to the engineering design standards. So those would be regulated in relation to those requirements. We did do some research and tried to find any documentation we had on any previous rezone applications for this property. We could not find any information in the minutes from previous Planning Commission meetings. That's not to state that it didn't happen, but we just were unable to find the historical data that supported what exactly was applied for and what exactly was denied or why. But we did try to do some research there along those lines. And the access along Highway 20, where you touched on, would be at 600 feet. I also wanted to point out, too, we do have the current city comprehensive land use plan, and again, this is facts related to the case and the use of this land. One of the things the Planning Commission is charged to do is to reference that comprehensive land use plan anytime we're looking at rezoning a property. That plan does include a future land use map and does include the area around the lake. This particular portion of the land around the lake on the north side is identified as mixed use in the 2005-2020 comprehensive land use plan. Of course, there is all the residential uses adjacent to the lake, but this particular land falls into the mixed use category on that comprehensive land use plan. Those are the facts related to the case as it's been presented to the Planning Commission and through the first reading at City Council. And again, we'd be glad to help answer any further questions council might have.
Thank you, Heath. Council, questions, comments? Councilman Danforth?
I have a couple questions first, Heath, and then I've got some comments if I could. If the total area in question tonight was rezoned to the C3, is that a large enough lot that it could be subdivided into 2 or more commercial lots?
The minimum lot size requirement for a C3 zoning district is 20,000 square feet. I believe the subject property is a total of 87,000.
So it could be.
Could be 4 potential C3 lots there. If you divide them out at 20,000 minimum each.
Okay. And then the next question is I was a little confused as to where the access would access be onto Highway 20 at the 600-foot point, or would that be on North Lake Drive?
The access in relation to that 600 feet is that's a DOT number, and that's the minimum spacing they would want to see from our street intersection. So that would be onto Highway 20 at least 600 feet west of the North Lake Drive intersection.
Okay. If they allowed it, that's where it would be.
If the applicant were to pursue that, and if the DOT were to entertain it, it would have to be with at least 600 feet west of that
All right,
intersection.
thank you. Couple comments I'd like to make on it. I've read through the various C's, the commercial zoning regs that we have on the books now, and I honestly believe that any one of them doesn't fit what we want and need to do at the lake today with what is allowed. I think there are some things that are in each one of those zones that we wouldn't want out there. I think we are behind the ball in regards to the establishment of a lake zoning district out at Lake Compesca. I am all for commercial zoning out there that supports the lake environment and is done appropriately. Comment was made to make it look aesthetically correct. I don't disagree with that. We have nothing in the books today that would govern us into what something would look like out there. So I'm hearing, the spillage of light. I'm hearing aesthetically appealing, and we talk about not knowing what the uses are. I think the application today, and Mr. Dolly, I commend you on bringing this forward. What little I've heard about it, I think in the lake environment, I think it would be supportive of that area. I think it's too premature. I would not, there's so many things that I believe we would not want to put in that environment, that if we rezone today, if we agree to this, no matter what Mr. Dolly says today or anybody else that's here, they could turn around tomorrow and do something completely different as long as it was allowable within the zone that was approved. And for that reason, I can't support it. We are premature. I believe we ultimately either need to have an overlay district at the lake so we can control certain things like what goes in there and what the aesthetics looks like. I think those things need to happen. I think we're premature in this. I think there are going to be more things that are coming out there. We need to be ready for it. Let's not make mistakes that we will have to live with for a long, long, long time. We have a lake, unfortunately, that doesn't have an outlet that I'm sure if we were talking about that today, we wouldn't close the outlet. So let's not make other mistakes at our lake that is such a valuable asset to our community. So I am, based on what could go out there, I cannot support it.
Thank you. Other councilman? Councilman Villar?
I've got a few questions I'll direct towards either probably Heath or Matt. Matt, I'll direct this one to you. I asked a question 2 weeks ago at the first reading. We have to either up or down approve or not approve the C3 designation. In other words, we cannot as a council change that to a C2 other than, the applicant has to make that move. In other words, we can't do that, correct?
Yes, it's my interpretation that is not allowable at this time under these circumstances because the public notice did not indicate that anything other than a C3 zone was going to be considered.
Okay. Nor, again, I'll ask it as a question, can we place any restrictions? Let's say we approve the C3, can we place any restrictions upon either current or future use of that property? Or do we have to abide by what our C3 zoning allows or does not allow?
Well, that would essentially be creating a new zone on the fly. We've done that once before with Casino Speedway, and so it's not unheard of, but my interpretation, a conservative reading of the statute, would indicate that the uses in one C3 have to be the same as the uses allowed in another C3, and so as our current ordinance reads, it's my opinion that that's not allowable.
Okay. I guess I'll direct this one to you, Heath. Can we require, as something happens out there now, if we were to approve this, can we require buffering? Trees, different aspects of that nature that would help minimize the sound, light, pollution, etc. What can be done or can't be done in that regard?
That's a good question, Councilman Vilhauer. As far as buffering or screening requirements, the Chapter 21, the zoning ordinance covers what's required at the time of development. I can't tell you off the top of my head, and I don't know if Brandy maybe knows that information, but what the Building Services Department would administer are those regulations to a T as they're required. There are certain zones that are required to have certain buffers or screening components when they're adjacent to other zones. And if our urban planner, Brandy Hanton, could provide any more information and detail on that, that'd be great.
I'm Brandy, the urban planner. As far as if we would go above and beyond our ordinance requirements, it would be if they were asking for a conditional use, then the Board of Adjustment could put further conditions on what we already require. So they could do additional screening.
Permitted uses, though, do have some landscaping requirements, but wouldn't be that it would be totally buffered or a sound break or anything like that. There would be a certain number of trees required.
Yep, and then just the setbacks for the district, which this property has triple frontage, so it's 40-foot setbacks from the right-of-way.
Okay. Thank you, Brandy. As long as we got the mic yet. I'm concerned about the bike path running on the south side there. I mean, that would be a safety concern of mine as well relative to the bike path. But I will say that my wife and I have lived in Watertown almost 40 years now, and time again I have heard the need for additional development, commercial type development around the lake. I don't like the idea of essentially spot zoning, if that's what you want to call this. I wish we would have a comprehensive plan in place. But by the same token, Mr. Dolly's got a piece of property that's R1 that, from a realistic standpoint, will probably never get developed as R1. And I've got to support his. I mean, as a property owner, he's got the right to, within the rules, go through the process to use his property in a manner that he sees appropriate. I understand the concerns of the neighbors around there, but by the same token, I as a council member have to look out what I feel is in the best interest of the community overall, and I feel this is an area that would lend itself to some sort of commercial development. I'm concerned too, not knowing what that development is necessarily at this point. But I also respect, the judgment of a business owner as far as what will or will not be acceptable in a particular area. And so anyway, for those reasons, I find myself, I would support this proposal.
Thank you. I would just like to reiterate what the city engineer said about the comprehensive plan. We did undertake the Lake Kempesca Master Plan, which is not a comprehensive plan. We have an adopted comprehensive plan for the city of Watertown. This is within the city of Watertown, and the recommended use for that area is mixed use, which it is in this area. Pointed out there's some construction buildings and some residences. There are mixed uses in this vicinity at this time. So it isn't like we don't have a comprehensive plan. We are looking for some guidance on how to meet the community's needs at the lake, and that was the purpose of the lake plan. But Councilwoman Manti, you wanted to say something?
I think you guys gave me great segues to this. One of the things that I hear fairly often is the lack of or the disappearance of public access for people who don't live on the lake. And I don't know if it's because they're not well marked, or if we are losing them, or if they're not available, that type of thing. And I was wondering if Brandy or Heath or somebody could just give me a little, you don't have to be, to the T, but I kind of like a number on the public accesses we still have remaining at the lake. And then the other thing, again, I understand what the folks who have houses there say, that, they bought the homes, peace and quiet, that type of thing. And I agree. I mean, but I live across the street from a scrap metal yard. So anyway, the lake is not just, I guess I don't want to insult you in the sense that I do understand, but I also hear from people that the lake is becoming just something the people who live around the lake can use. And I guess that I want to bring that up as we're discussing different uses around the lake, because I think as a council person, as Glenn said, I owe it to the whole community to take a look at this project and any like it. So I like the idea that people want peace and quiet, but I also like the idea of the young lady who said, let's make this a lake that the city can use, that the whole community can use. And I think it can be done in a way that has minimum disruption, and I think people have talked about that. But I guess I'd like to know a little bit with the mixed use and the public access, that type of thing. That would help me understand, what do we have available for people who live in the city right now in terms of amenities if they wanted to access the lake.
Heath, do you want to answer that? Can you?
I can attempt to, as far as the extent of my knowledge.
We do have a map, and I can guide you to it. There
Okay.
are about a dozen lake accesses or more at the lake. And Heath and Brandy haven't been working at the lake that long. I'm not sure if they are familiar with all the access points. Essentially, we have access points at the parks, and then at every place where a section line is extended into the lake. And Brandy, if you want to look under G, Lake Compesca, and then there's public access. Or Heath, you want to do it?
I can look at that.
Unless you do know. Have you seen that map?
Mayor, while we're waiting, can I ask a question of you?
There was several
I'm
other
sorry.
people that had their hands up. Councilman Albertson, did you want to say something?
Well, while she's looking, I'd just like to comment that when Vanessa tells us that that wasn't a proper place for a C3 or a C, and I know it's mixed use, I'm hearing that, but I'm very concerned with what is going to go in there too. If I were a property owner on the north side and it was told, because I'm on the south side, I wouldn't want to wake up to something, not knowing what that is. I'm very concerned about this tonight, and Vanessa really kind of solidified it, I think, for me, in the fact that she said that they're not going to recommend that in their plan. And boy, I'm not against Watertown having fun things at the lake, but I'm very concerned about this project.
Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Bueller?
That's right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry.
There's been some really compelling arguments for this thing tonight. And, Mike and I have spent a lot of time over the years on planning. 20 years for me, Mike, you're a dozen years or so. I'm sure you were on there as well. When you look at it from that standpoint, we always had to ask ourselves whenever we made these types of decisions, what could happen down the road. You got to look at this 25, 50 years down the road, what could go there once we do rezone that. Once we've done that. And, just so some of the folks know that some of the uses for this would be like a service station, motor vehicle sales, farm and machinery, semi-tractor sales. You could have that there. I mean, those are some of the uses. And then you get into a list of conditional uses. But we have to look down the road at these things too. And we're paying a lot of money for that master plan. And if they're saying there could be flood issues, that does not bode well for this location. But we also have to be sensitive, I think, to the folks that are adjacent to these properties, the people that live by it. They're the ones that are affected. And we've heard a lot of great arguments from folks that maybe aren't necessarily adjacent to this property tonight. But we have to look at, I always have to ask myself, would I like it in my backyard, in their case, in their front yard? But those are some concerns that I have. The other thing would be setting a precedent for further development to the west. I'm all for developing where it makes sense around Lake Compesca and trying to bring more business in and trying to get those tax revenues. But I just don't think that we want to set a precedent for continuation. And I do recall, I will say that back on the Planning Commission when I was on there with Brian Pellish, we did have at least one that I remember was a storage shed application that was turned down. And the adjacent property owners were vehemently opposed to that as well. But the interaction with the bike trails that we were discussing earlier, I just, in planning, it's typically not a good transition to go from R1 to a C3.
usually it's R2, it's R3, you know. That's how we typically would move to that type of zoning. So I think it's premature, and I would like to see the plan that we've paid $85,000 to have done, to see what we could do down the road. But I just think it's premature from my planning experience, and from what I'm hearing from the adjacent neighbors. I wouldn't be able to support that tonight. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilman Danforth?
While we're pulling that map up, are you aware, have we lost any access to the lake? I'm not aware of having lost any access to the lake.
Not in the last 20 years,
Yeah,
but
I mean-
there were vacated rights of way through time that occurred, but not since I've been here.
Yeah, that's the same here. Since I've been here, I think
But
you've got
the-
the same access points and the
Many
same.
of the access points aren't improved where people see
Right.
them as a park or something. It's just an unimproved
Yep, it's
right of
looks
way.
like a gravel road going into the
Yeah,
into
and
the lake.
some
is
aren't
really
even
what
a
it's at.
road.
Yeah,
But there's still public, and
but
that's the way.
that's just wanted to go back to Beth's
Yeah.
statement of what she's hearing, and I'm just not aware of having lost access to the lake.
Well, I
But
think-
just so if it has happened, I'd like to know where.
I
that
think it
occurred.
has to do, excuse me, more with the unimproved and, you know, that type of thing. You know, you can drive right by it, not even see it, you know, because it doesn't look like a public access point.
Right.
And there's no facilities or any kind of ramp or dock, any of those kind of things on those public access. They're pretty primitive, I guess, if that's what you want to say. So that was one of the things that I
Right.
wanted to bring up.
When, in 1997, when we did the stabilization project around the lake, I researched all the access points because the contractor had to get on and off of the lake, all over the lake. And there are quite a few unimproved spots, but there could be a lot more too, because anytime someone needs to get access to do construction on their shoreline, that's how they get there, through those public access points. Heath, were you able to find that map?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, if Ray could pull up my screen there. So it looks like there are several there's 20 of them listed on this map, public access areas. I believe the area that we're looking at here is generally number 6 and number 5. Number 5 is indicated as Midway Alley. No, you had it there, I think.
While we're working on the technical difficulties, if you guys remember in 2017, there was a request to vacate public access on Marina Bay, which the Plan Commission did not recommend, so that didn't go forward because of the city's intentions on retaining those access points.
So there you have the map flashing before your eyes.
I
All
might
of
have
those
to go to the
spots.
roof with some aluminum foil to get this to
There.
come in right.
Oh,
but,
there it is. Okay, what other comments do we have? Does the council have any, Councilman Roby? Guys.
I'm in favor of doing some commercial development on the lake. I do think we need to look at those things. Get access to other people that don't live on the lake. I do have a question though. If this were to get approved, and I'm going to ask this towards Heath, if I could. If it were to get approved, and then one of these uses come up down the road that a vast majority of people, not just the neighbors, but everybody thinks is not a good use for that, there's no way we can stop it, or there is a way we could stop it?
That's a good question, Councilman Roby. And one point that we should hit on is that in the zoning ordinance, we have a list of permitted uses. And if any of those permitted uses are selected by the landowner to be utilized, there's no formal stopping of that use. That's why it's considered a permitted use of the zoning ordinance. The other uses that are also listed are conditional uses. Those take approval by the Board of Adjustment in order to use the property in those manners. And so there's those two separate lists. The permitted uses have already been vetted through the zoning ordinance and passed by city council and the planning commission and subsequently city council as allowed permitted uses. And so the future review of any development that would occur would be to the physical improvements, meeting the building setbacks, the proper infrastructures in place, the access control, the drainage and runoff considerations. All of those physical improvements would get thoroughly reviewed and vetted. But if the use falls under one of the permitted uses, my interpretation and my common administration of the zoning ordinances are that they would be allowed to move forward as a permitted use.
Right. All conditional uses are required to have a public hearing as well before the Board of Adjustment. So there's a public point where the public can have some say. But you should pull that down so people can see the permitted uses.
Mayor, if I could.
Yes, Councilman Bueller.
Just something to think about, and this is we've done this in the past with conditional uses. We really didn't have. We had a property one time that was adjacent to R1, and it was commercial. It was already built for commercial. This was a pass indiscretion from years ago, and what can take place is we can add a conditional use. We did that once. We did special office building, and we had a description for that to allow people to build specific types of businesses in that area that we had to rezone adjacent to R1. So that is another option that can take place if need be.
Okay, Councilman Roby.
So, by the way, all good arguments on both sides of the issue. Under the current scenario, I don't know how we're ever going to get commercial development on the lake.
If we keep waiting for a perfect
I don't know how we're going to get commercial development, which I get a lot of pressure for. I get a lot of people saying, we need to do things to the lake. We want commercial development at the lake. It's a big thing to our community. Under the current scenario, I don't know how we do it. Because if we don't approve this, then we've got, the lake is well known. It isn't just the zoning, it's the rights of way. The way they developed the lake, it never kind of got done on an orderly basis. And then we bring it into the city back in the early 70s, I think it was. If you look at the maps, there isn't much that lines up very well. Rights of way, property lines. We've seen some of that come through the council in the last few years. So this is a tough one, but right now, I don't know how we're ever going to get any commercial development done in the lake.
Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, Don, I think the key to it is to look solely at a plan for commercial development at the lake and not take the current citywide commercial zoning criteria that we have used. I think I think the lake is its own little animal out there. I think we have to be very cognizant of what we want out there because it's such a finite area that would be available to us to support the lake environment. And I think we create something that whatever it is that we allow out there and wherever it is, it needs to be complementary to the lake. I don't think a parking lot with a bunch of combines in it is complementary to the lake. We have other places that those things can go to, a veterinarian shop out there or store or whatever they are, clinic. I don't think that's complementary to what the lake environment is. I think there are certain things that through some work, I think they could be worked on, and I think we could at least narrow down the opportunities of the types of commercial development that could go out there that would at least take some of the concerns that I've heard here tonight and that I would have and do have away. Now, there's no question that no matter what happens, we're still going to have, no matter what, if we had the perfect environment and zoning out there for some commercial development, we're still going to have people that are going to be concerned with access and noise and light and whatever. Those things are still going to happen. But at least we narrow down the mistake of allowing something to go in out there that we just don't want out there. It just doesn't fit that environment. So I think that's at least your step forward is to take the time to work on the commercial development, the overlay district, whatever you want to call it, specific to the lake and whatever region around the lake we define it to be, And then at least we have a starting point. But if we use today's standards in our definitions and zoning and uses, it's not going to happen.
Councilman Lallam?
A couple things here. I was reading through the zoning ordinance here, permitted uses, service stations, retail, service, hotel, things of that nature. I think what we have to look at, and I understand Mike's concerns, actually Mike and I have talked about this a little bit, trying to find something that's gonna help utilize the lake and be a complementary business to the lake. I completely understand that. Some of the things that the people have brought up concerns are about storage units, contractor shops, things of that nature. Those are conditional uses where you have to go back in front to change that or to be able to allow to use that. As far as trying to get commercial around the lake, we have such limited land that's available that fits on this. This is along the highway. There's a lot of traffic there anyway. I mean, let's be honest, there's traffic that runs from City of Watertown to Florence and beyond and takes that out to Webster. So, I mean, it's not light traffic, no matter how you look at it. There is a lot of lights that are along there from people that live there. I completely understand the concerns of it. No one wants to have a big gaudy object behind them, but at the same time, we have to look at, they're not going to put a business there that isn't going to work there. I mean, you got to have to look at it that I'm not going to put something out there that's going to fail just because I am allowed to put it in there. So as a business owner and someone that would look at putting a structure up there, you gotta see, is this going to be profitable? Is it going to be work out there? Is it going to fit the market on who's going to be out there? I'm not going to bring my storage stuff from living in the southeast part of town out by the lake and put in a storage unit out there when we have 6,000 of them around closer to town. So from that aspect, I mean, you have to kind of give some of these people a little bit of leniency that they're going to make a good decision that's not only good for themselves, but it's going to be good for the area. So whether or not, this year's a different animal because of the amount of water that we had, the flooding there, that lot that's a couple over from that has had water and probably, I would say, a significant amount of water. It's also right next to a slough. I mean, let's be honest, that's a natural spot for that water to sit anyway. It's lower than the lots next to it. This one does sit up. It's in the 100-year flood zone, so there are going to be minimal stuff that they can build on it because of that. So those are items that we all have taken into effect, and you got to look at through the zoning ordinance what the requirements are, what they're allowed to build on. I mean, they're not going to build, because they got 80,000 square feet, they're not going to build 80,000 square foot structure. They're going to have a minimal amount of setbacks that they have to meet on all sides. And if they have to come off the highway, it needs to be something that works coming off the highway. So those are the items I have. Just looking through that and looking at conditional uses, there's a lot of conditional uses that I personally would never want to see out there, and I don't think anyone that's looking to design and build on there is looking to have either. So those are my concerns, my thoughts. Sorry, I'm just going to stop hitting that.
Thank you. Councilman Roby?
I regret not going back and taking the time to see the Planning Commission meeting, and I will definitely do that after this. But why did they support it? I mean, it passed 6-1. What was the rationale? By the way, those committees are in place to look at issues in depth and make recommendations. And I think we as a governing body have to take those recommendations very seriously. Otherwise, we don't need the committees. So they serve a purpose. Why was it 6-1?
Heath, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I can talk to the discussion, the talking points from the Planning Commission for Councilman Roby. Generally speaking, going back to the comprehensive land use plan, that's one of the documents that they rely heavily on in making decisions for any rezone applications. That plan has laid out for us a vision for what the future zoning districts throughout the city might look like and should look like several years down the road. This particular location, again, being marked as a mixed use, I think that probably weighed in on their decision making on why they felt this was an allowable approval. And then I think otherwise, generally speaking, I hate to speak for the planning commissioners, but generally speaking, the interest that they've heard from the community members of needing more commercial activity, more commercial lake-related commercial activity out there. Some of the same reservations were expressed by the planning commissioners as well. Some of the same concerns that the residents have and that some of the council members have shared tonight were expressed by the planning commissioners. So I think it was a pretty well-balanced discussion in their determination. I'd say those 2 points probably stood out the most to me, looking at the comprehensive land use plan, knowing it's marked as mixed use, and the community's need for, or the perception of a need for, more commercial activity around the lake.
Thank you. Councilwoman Manti?
I would just like to confirm with you that with the setbacks that Brandy mentioned, it's a 80, what did I have here, 80,000 square foot?
87,000.
Yeah, but the buildable area looks to me to be closer to less than 40,000? Is that?
It was 37,000. And we have that map, Heath, if you want to pull it up. So it's about 2 acre parcel, but really only under an acre is buildable. And then also with that, if they do improve to up to an acre of impervious surface, then as far as it being in a floodplain, they would have to detain their drainage on their property and then release it at the pre-developed rate. And just to touch on the floodplain too, they can develop in there, and they would just have to adhere to our ordinances and, include the freeboard. They could bring in fill, any of that.
This area has had fill brought in, and I don't think that most of this was underwater. The west part of it was this spring, but most of it was high and dried because they have placed fill over the years. And there's nothing preventing that right now on that property.
Yep.
Other comments or questions? All right, we have a motion and second on the floor for approval of the rezone request. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Albertson?
Nay.
Bueller? Nay. Danforth?
Nay.
Lallam?
Yes.
Manti? Yes. Roby? Solom?
Yes.
Thorson? Billhauer? Yes. Y?
Yes.
Six to 4, it passes.
Thank you. All right, that's it for that one. The rezone was approved. Item number 5 is approval of resolution number 19-25, resetting the on-sale alcoholic beverage license fee for full-service restaurants. And I'm not going to ask for a motion at this time because there's a blank in the dollar amount for resetting the dollar amount. So we'll wait for folks to finish moving around. And then I'll ask the city attorney, Matt Roby, to tell us about this one. All right, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. As you'll recall, the council back in April addressed this issue, and the motion at the time was to continue the price that had been set for the previous 10 years to this meeting to readdress the issue. So just a quick history lesson. Back in 2009, the 2008 legislative session, I guess, the legislature created this new on-sale liquor license that was meant to be sold to entities that were restaurants, essentially, that sold more than 60% of had more than 60% of the sales of their gross revenue came from food and non-alcoholic beverages. Communities were given the option to whether or not to implement it. We chose to adopt the ordinance, and then the first order of business was to set a fee based on the current fair market value at that time. And based on that fair market value, the fee was set at $205,000. By state statute, that amount had to remain in place for 10 years, and that 10-year period recently expired. And so that's why this issue has come back before the council to be addressed. And so, as I said, the meeting in April, we addressed the issue. The council approved continuing the $205,000 to this meeting, and it's was put back on the agenda based on that motion, and it's up for your consideration. A couple other points. I did, as we discussed at the last council meeting where we discussed this issue, I did send out letters to all the liquor license holders, all the on-sale liquor license holders in the community. There's 27 of them, asking if they would voluntarily supply us with the information that would let us know what they paid for their license, essentially. I did obtain information on 10 of the licenses, 10 of the 27, and based on that information, the average price paid was $178,250. The highest price paid was $205,000, and the lowest price paid was $150,000. And again, that was based on the responses from 10 of the 27 entities.
All right, thank you. This is not a public hearing. This is just revisiting. The council wanted to take some time to look into the issue further. And I know there's a lot of people in the audience. Does the council feel like you've had enough input to make a decision? Councilman Solom?
I'm going to be recusing myself from this.
Okay. Councilman Roby?
I have to recuse myself from this one also.
Okay. Anyone else want to recuse? There are people in the audience, so if I did open this up for comment, how many of you came hoping that you'd get a chance to speak? It's 3. So what's that? Yeah, I'm willing to let you speak with the same rules as before. Please try to keep it to just a couple of minutes and don't repeat. And it's not a debate, so don't be, wanting to come back and back.
All right, my name is Mike Lawrence. I didn't want to come up last time. I didn't want to really get involved with it. But there are some areas, and it's not the lake rezone that just happened, but there's some other areas that me and a partner are working on to try to get some things going on at Lake Compesca. We take a look at these licenses, and some of the last 2 numbers we've heard are sold were 105,000. Something that the other people didn't touch on, and that's why I kind of showed up tonight, was the differences in that license. There was a couple that weren't touched, and one of them was the higher margin. As a bar owner and as an owner of a liquor license, I want to sell the Crown. I want to sell the top shelf. I want to sell doubles. With a license like this, if I sell a hamburger for $9 and then I sell a $9 drink, I'm at 50% already with one cocktail when I serve that with my license. For me to come out and pay $205,000 where somebody else paid $150,000, I'm at an immediate disadvantage right there. On top of that, I have to quit selling the higher margin or quit selling the amount of alcohol for that reason as well. So I can't go ahead and sell the highest margin. I have to watch it out. If I open something brand new at the lake, I don't know the business model of that. I don't know where it's going to land, how it's going to land. I can watch that very closely, but if I miss that by 1%, 2%, 3%, correct me if I'm wrong, if I go over 41%, you have my $205,000. Okay, I agree that business is a risk you take, and I believe that the higher the risk you take, the more reward. But I don't think anyone, if we're going to look at this license at $205,000, you might as well not offering it, because you're offering a disadvantage to whoever purchases that, a high disadvantage. Something else that I wanted to make notice is that it's not loanable. You can't use it as collateral. I went down to Dakota Bank today. I went in the president's office. I spoke with a lot of the liquor license owners because, it is one of those things. There is some place where we're going to have it be at a disadvantage for this and our other licenses. I don't think there's a long line of people. I know I talked to another gentleman that's here today that would need another one of these licenses. And I asked him, I said, are you going to pay $205? He said, no, I'll go without. And I've made it on beer. It works, but it's a lot harder. And having the liquor license helps. Another thing that you can touch on is everyone's talking about how they're going to lose it. They're going to lose money when these things come in. They're going to lose it. Nobody talks about how when the county liquor license came in, they made that money. Nobody says, well, that wasn't, that was okay. But when they start going down, one of the reasons I think they went down is because we started implementing the 2-year rule. People were holding onto these liquor licenses, not using them, holding them as hostage, which grew up the price. Now we have to use them every 2 years. They have to have some sort of sales. They have dropped $50,000, $60,000. So they are dropping from where they were because of the rules, and the state wants them to be used, and they came up with other licenses so that we can enact this. They did set a minimum of $21,842. They set a minimum of that. But I believe that they put these licenses in place for a reason, and that's, somebody's told me, well, it's for the people, it's for the franchises, it's for the franchises. I know one franchise here had paid over the $205,000 while this $205,000 license was available. If these licenses are for apples, why did that franchise come in and pay $15,000 over what they could just purchase one for? I truly believe that they're not apples to apples. It's a high risk. It's a risk that I have to take with cash. I cannot go to the bank and borrow, or I can borrow against my house, but I can't borrow and use this as collateral, which the other licenses that's available for. You can do that with the other license. This license you cannot. So that was just some of the points I want to make, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mike, I have a question.
You bet.
As a business owner, then, what would you be comfortable paying for a license of this nature?
That's a question that has gone through my mind since the last meeting. It's a tough call. If it was different and I wasn't going to lose it immediately if I went over, it would be higher. I want it to be fair, and I guess I have accountants, appraisers, all those things that sit on this board. Maybe I'm not the right person to come up with this number. I've been in this business a lower amount of time, a less amount of time than most of these people who have the license. They said, well, I paid for mine for 20 years it took. They had that ability to do that. The bank won't give me that ability to do that. So I have to take a 1-year risk on a brand new business and hope that I don't go over. And if the problem is, if I do too well, I lose it. And that's scary to me. It really is. To jump into this thing and take that risk, and it'd be better to pull the license out of my current place, put one of these licenses in there. These licenses are built for restaurants, okay? All our restaurants are operating with these licenses. Most of these restaurants can fall under this license. Yes, they could get rid of it and make a bar, but the city's not going to support 35 bars. It just isn't, And so I don't know what that number is. I like 100,000 or less, but like I said, I'm not going to take that number. I just want you to know that there is a difference, and that there is a huge risk associated with this license that you have to put something other than the business on the line for. You have to go off and find a way to finance that. And that financing, he told me it's like the city has the first right on that. It's like he's the first lien holder of that license, is what the bank kind of told me today. They said because they can take that license back at any time that I don't do it right. And the hardest part for me to come up with is doing it right might be going over, and it's a lot easier for me to do it because I do have a POS and I watch it, but you don't want to just shut off the tank but you have to watch it. And I don't know, it's a really hard thing, and I'm glad I'm not sitting in those chairs, and I'm glad we got you guys up there, because I think you'll come to a conclusion, I would hope, that would be a little bit more fair. But $205,000, if you're going to leave them at that, you might as well just get rid of them, because you're putting whoever buys that at a disadvantage completely.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask Mike one more question?
Okay.
Sorry, maybe I'm running him over time. So you're comfortable with giving the finance department your records?
Correct, yep. Bill Howard Rammel will send it right over. I don't touch my books. I pay them a lot of money. So, which I have no problem with that. We have a POS, it runs reports, it does everything like that. It just sends everything, everything's automatic to the accountant. I think there's some people that might not want to do that. I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So I do want to clarify, he referenced Vilhar Rammel. VRS is an accounting firm now, and I am no longer involved with the firm.
Good evening, Jeff Geiser from Clifford Steakhouse, just down the road. I myself am not really clear in understanding the disadvantage of this restaurant liquor license. Can you explain to me what the disadvantages are?
For one, if you sell more than 40% of your product comes from alcohol, you lose the license.
Okay.
And you've lost whatever you paid for it. You don't get it back.
Okay.
That's probably the main thing.
I'm sorry to interject. My understanding, when the restaurant license first became available, there was also limited hours of operation, with 11 o'clock being the deadline.
No.
It's no longer the case.
So it was changed?
That was an ordinance change. It was applicable to, it was a Sunday licensing issue. I don't think it was applicable to this license specifically.
Okay. Well, I know, speaking from business, my experience has been that I would have no concern whatsoever of selling more than 40%. Again, we're mainstay food, drink. We do a few hours of alcohol operation on the weekends. But you want to see how much liquor you really sell, I don't think it would be a concern of anybody going over the 40%. I think that's unrealistic. I think the 40% is easily kept underneath if you're selling food. If you got a good restaurant and good food, you're not going to go over that 40%. So I don't see that as being a very valid concern for somebody to not pay the just price for this license.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie Meyer, Foxy's Bar, Grill, and Casino. I think what you have is a bad license. Obviously, like the gentleman just spoke back here, not only is he in the restaurant, but he's in real estate. And what banker is going to give you a loan on that? My understanding, it is not transferable. You can't sell it. So why we're jeopardizing those of us that have been in this business and supported this community and paid our money, and we did go to the bank, and when we bought Foxy's, it did not have a liquor license. Our first day of business, we did $89. It was a business that was going under. We worked for 2 years, blood, sweat, and tears, got the banks to trust us, waited for a license to become available, and we purchased one. That is the way that liquor licenses have ran since I've been in this business over 40 years. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, everyone. Since that zone passed, I want to say I own North Shore, and there's a lot of fill in front of my place, so you can fill that up with all the sand and sediment you want. So we got that clear. The other thing is I do have a license.
Randy,
and
can you state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Randy Grunwald. I own Dakota Butcher and the North Shore that we've been speaking about today, and I hope you guys come there. But what I'm thinking is I'm on the fence on this too, because I own a license and the bank valued it at $150,000. And I know when I was a banker, there was a gentleman that came into my office and wanted to buy a license for $150,000. That was a few years prior to when they valued the one I have. And along with that license, I think there is value in it as far as casino. You get a casino, correct? With the current liquor license, you have an opportunity to have a casino license with that.
The full liquor license, you mean?
Yeah, the full liquor license. And then you also have a, there's no distinguishing what you're selling as far as booze. I mean, booze to food, which this North Shore, I think we will have no problem hitting the food like the Miss Clifford's. I can't remember your name. I'm sorry. I don't think that we'll have a problem hitting that number, but I do feel there's a value in the original license I have compared to the license that I'm trying to apply for tomorrow. So I don't know what that number is. I'm, some of those, like Foxy's, I appreciate what she's done for 40 years in this business and built a great business. I go to Foxy's and it's great and it's great food, and that's how you build your business, is having great food, not because they can pour the same drink that I can pour. I'm pretty certain, so that's how you build your business. It doesn't have to much to do with the value of the liquor license. It has a lot to do with how you perform with that liquor license or what you're going to do with it. And I will need a liquor license out there because we're going to bring some venue or some weddings and things of that nature too. That's our goal, is to have them, people from out of town, come to our North Shore restaurant, and I think we'll bring a lot of dollars into our community, which will benefit everybody in this room, the gas station people, the liquor store people, and not just they're going to get sick of our food. They're going to go to your place too, guys. They'll go to Foxy's too. And where I'm going with this is I didn't even want to come because I didn't want to make any enemies out of anybody here. But I do have that same license that Foxy's end up, whoever paid $205 for it, they valued it $150 at the last one, which tells me that the value of, no different than the value at a house. If you invest in a house, you're taking that chance that that house will be worth, well, you're living in that house. You're using that liquor license as part of the business. And if it gets taken away because you don't hit that number that you're supposed to hit, well, that was like building by the hospital, and they pay you nothing to expand their hospital. It's like some people are investing on this and using it as an investment, but I think the people that are coming into your community right now and going to use this license, I think what they're using it for is that drink. They're relying, like Clifford says, they're relying on their food to bring the people in, not so much the booze. But then in turn, I would say, well, if they're relying on your food to build your business, why are you charging us so much for a liquor license, right? So that's where I'm at. I think I'm going to try to serve a lot of meals out of our place, just like Clifford's, just like Foxy's, just like even my buddy Harry's over behind me. And I'll tell you what, it really will be tough for me to borrow any more money from this town after the money I stuck in North Shore. So I'm either going to have to pick your guys' pockets for the 100,000, or you guys get 150,000, whatever you determine. But you can't borrow it. If you can't borrow money against the license, that alone really supports the depreciated value of the license that a lot of these places, including me, I have already. I borrowed money on my other license, so you got to consider that too, because that's part of your business, having a liquor license. But you're not going to charge me a license for the food, are you? Because then we'd be in real trouble. Because no, I'm just kidding on that. But I'm on both sides of the fence. I can't tell you what to charge, but I do know that in the past, the last couple have been around 150,000 that I've looked went back. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
For the full unlimited liquor license?
Yes.
Okay.
We
Yes.
haven't sold any restricted
talking about what he
licenses, so,
has.
yeah.
So
Any
he has-
license that has been sold in Watertown has been an unrestricted license, because
Yes.
nobody's bought a
That's what I mean.
restricted one.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and the last couple have been around 150, I think, is what it has been. So that's the market as far as I'm concerned on the regular, non-restricted, but.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Randy, I have a question for you.
Shoot.
So the last license you bought, the unrestricted, you paid $150 for.
That was the value
Or the
they
bank
gave,
put.
because that was, the previous one was sold for 150 at an auction.
Okay, I'll ask you the same question I asked Mike. What would you value this restricted license at?
Between 100 and 150. There's less value just because Mr. Roby's going to take it from me when I can't give him the numbers. So there is less value, and I hope the other bar owners understand it. If they were to offer me my license, for, offer me $150,000 for the new license, the restricted license, you want to call it, for my license, I would never do that. I don't know who in their right mind would, give it for the same amount of money, I guess, and sleep at night.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, council. Do you want to discuss it? Anybody have a motion? We need to set a value. We right now can't sell any until we do that. And we don't have to have this license. We can jack it up high and we won't sell any. Or you can put it at a level where people buy it. That's up to you. Councilman Danforth?
First of all, I do want to add one point of clarity that when many meetings ago that we attached $100,000 as a number to that cost of that license, that was just a flip number that we threw out to have something
Just a placeholder.
to prompt, yep,
That's what
to prompt discussion.
other cities our size
and
charge.
hoping to garner people coming here and having this discussion. So it wasn't not a well thought out thing. It was just a throw out at that point. But the other point of clarification is as the city, it's not necessarily automatic that if they don't attain the 60% that they would lose it. It may be lost. Is that correct?
Well,
The
the
language
language
states-
in the statute says it shall not be renewed unless they can provide proof of the proper ratios.
I mean, there's a lot of things here, and a couple of comments. I'm sitting here wondering if we put a lower number on this thing, which I am in support of. The 205 is a ridiculous number. If it's set right, it might actually increase the value of those existing licenses. Because of the risks and the fact that you can't use it for collateral and that type of thing, it might actually raise the value of those things. But my last comment on it, well, I won't say that, I won't promise that. A comment on it is this, is we just voted on rezoning a property at the lake because it was the right thing for the community. It wasn't necessarily, as what we heard from the people, it may not have been the right thing for those people that spoke against it, that live near it, but the determination was that's what the community wanted and that's what was the right thing for the community. I don't see this as anything different than that, in all reality. What's the right thing for our community? And we talk about development, commercial development, and bringing in businesses, and a $205,000. Unfortunately, so many of these types of businesses require a liquor license of some sort, and $205,000 is not going to enlist people coming into our community commercially that are looking for this type of thing. So I think we do need to make a change. We asked 27 people. We told them at the last meeting that it's critical that we get their input, that we know, so that we have good information to work from. And we got 10 out of 27 that responded to us, which from my perspective, when I heard that the other day, is very disappointing. So I really wonder how much of a concern it is. So my suggestion is that we somewhere take, we know what the average is, and I think it should be less than the average. And I agree with Mr. Grunwald that somewhere between the 100 and to 150 is probably the right number. And exactly what that number is I'd certainly like to hear other people's opinions on it, but I think it needs to be in that range.
I understand Aberdeen has had theirs at 100,000 for 10 years, and they've sold one. And we had ours at 205 for 10 years, and we sold 0. Currently, Rapid City charges $295,000, Sioux Falls $260,000, Aberdeen $100,000, Brookings $100,000, and that's Matt's research. Did you hear from anyone else after sending that message?
Actually, let's see here.
Oh, T.
What's that?
T, South Dakota, 4,000.
We did have a gentleman call in and say that T was charging 4,000. It looks like Mitchell is at 190,000. They've sold 0. Pier 110,000. They've sold 1. Spearfish is 130,000. They've sold 2.
Thank you. Councilwoman Manti?
I have several points. One being, well, you answered one of them with how many have been sold. The other is, I think it would be helpful for people to understand a little bit, for those watching and for those in the audience, how this license came about. I don't know that people understand why we ended up with a restricted license that we have sitting here, that we haven't sold any of them. Was this something that the state established, or it was something the state established to give us a chance to have liquor licenses beyond population? Is that?
Yeah, I can recap that again. So in 2008, the legislature created this new license, and it was a state requirement. The 60/40 is not set by us; it's set by state statute. And we were given the opportunity to adopt the ordinance, or adopt an ordinance that allowed for that license or not, and the council chose to. And then the first order of business was to set the license fee based on the current fair market value, which this council did, set it at $205,000, and then that fee had to remain for 10 years. And then after that, the law was recently amended to basically state that we could set it at no lower than basically the population of the community at the last census. So 21,482 is the lowest amount you could set the license fee at.
And a follow-up question to that. I think that the comment was made that we have a bad license, and in some cases I believe that we absolutely do. I think that we could serve the community much better by taking a look at what would spur development, at what cost would that be effective. That food thing for, somebody who's got, I'm going to use the lounge as an example. They sell some bar food and things like that, and they have a beer and wine. They would like to be able to, expand kind of some of their liquor sales and things like that. And I just think that if you buy something that you can lose just because your sales take a turn one day or the other, I think that we need to either, here's my personal feeling, we either need to make this low enough for people to take the risk and get started, or we have to just not have it. And then we have to take a step back and look at our other liquor licenses and say, okay, how can we put these liquor licenses, malt beverage, wine, whatever it is, let's make them more user-friendly. Let's not force people who don't need a license such as this to have to buy one, and at a great risk. I don't know if people are following me on this. So, and I think that way, I understand about the, contributing to the community and working hard and, with these unlimited licenses, and I really do appreciate that. I also know that, the rising tide raises all ships in the harbor. And so if you've got more people coming to the area, more people coming downtown, more people doing things in the community, everybody's going to benefit from it. But I think right now, we don't have a mechanism for us to allow some of the other people to take a risk, open a small bar, and let's give some more people a chance to put 30 years in, and perhaps they start with one of these smaller licenses and it costs $50,000 and they sell it back to us for $50,000, and at the time unlimited is available, and now they've got their sweat equity. Excuse me, but there's so many other things we can do besides just say it out here. You got to do the 60/40 no matter what price we set, and there it is. And that's where I think it's a bad license. And I'm just saying this as somebody who's been in the business, but as also somebody who would want to take a look at what I would do if I wanted to start a business. Say I want to take one of those empty buildings downtown and say, you know, that would be a really cool place for a little, you know, speakeasy, I don't know, jazz club, something like that. But I can't sell 40%. I can't do 40-60 in a jazz club, but people are going to want martinis in a jazz club. Okay, just my opinion.
Okay, I should comment, piggybacking on that a little bit. I've just been to Recon, the retail conference in Las Vegas, and met with retailers from all over the nation. And, you know, we're hoping a department store would come to Watertown, and we talked with lots of different people, but the one segment of the retail sector that's really interested and willingly set up meetings with us and sought us out is restaurants. And there is a desire, and we do have a market. That's what Buxton told us. That's what Retail Strategies told us. And when they looked at our numbers at Recon, they were surprised at how underserved our market is for restaurants. You can tell that from the numbers that they have access to. So I think that making it a little bit easier for restaurants to come here could probably help. Councilman Thorson?
Yeah, Mayor, my question was, Aberdeen sold one for $100,000. Has that business complied, or is it still in business, or just a curiosity?
Yeah, it's Wings and Rings up there on 6th, I think it is. It's still in business, yeah.
Sure. Councilman Vilhar?
May I guess it's the accountant in me. I have a couple of questions for you. How was that? How are those? Is that 60-40? Or how are those numbers looked at? What's the timing? In other words, you apply for a license, you get it today, tomorrow, whenever. Is it then the next 12 months from that point, or what's the cutoff, or what's the measuring period there? Do you know that from what you got in the statute?
It's the calendar year, so the renewals are are issued for the calendar year. And so what we would do is if somebody were to purchase this license and apply for it in June, say, that license they're selling themselves short a little bit with the timing because they still have to pay the full amount of the renewal and that sort of thing for that first 6 months. But then after that, we would look, going forward, we look at the previous 12 months to make sure they met that requirement before we would renew the license.
Okay. And when you look at the numbers, are those the numbers prepared by the restaurant? And if so, do they need to be audited then by an independent accounting firm, or are you taking the restaurant numbers word for what they're showing you?
You know, I think how this would play out in real life, I guess, is we would take what they would submit to us, and if it appeared to us that they seem to be operating more of a bar than a restaurant, we could. The statute allows us to do additional diligence and to investigate. But if all appearances show that this appears to be operating as a restaurant and the numbers show it, I mean, myself, I probably wouldn't do any additional research. I would assume that the numbers are correct, but that certainly council could formulate some sort of a policy for us to verify those numbers.
Okay. Just a couple of comments now. I guess this time Mike, you and I are on the same page on this, and I'll say what I said a while ago at the last discussion, is that this is one of those things that we look at what is in the best interest of the community as a whole, and expanding our restaurant trade is something that, again, we have heard time and time and time again, that we, if we're going to get serious about economic development, et cetera, that is something that we need to support. And if we look at the numbers that we've been given, if 150 is the lowest price, and sounds like that's what recent transactions have been going for. To me, this restricted license has got to be less than the $150,000. Again, just to get a number on the table, I mean, where are we at in procedurally tonight, Mayor? I mean, I'm ready to throw a number out just for sake of argument, and then we can go from there, or?
There were a couple people that wanted to comment, but then we can take a motion. Did you want to say something, Councilman Albertson?
I think it's a really slippery slope on this because obviously 205 is way too expensive for this license. But I think we really have to worry about Jeff and Julie and the other people. We want to worry about Randy. We'd like to see Randy do well in our community. So it's a slippery slope, but I'm just commenting that 205,000 is way too high. My thought was 150. I don't know if that's unfair because if there was a license came up for an unrestricted came up for 150, then I don't know if it makes sense to have this restrictive one be 150. But that was what my thought was. We'd be cutting off 65,000 from what this other license would be, but I'm really concerned about both entities there. The people that have worked for the 27 years or 30 years, that we undermine them. And, you know, people say, well, you can't worry about them. You want to worry about the community. Well, they are the community. And so somehow we got to worry about Randy and others that want, Mike that wants to come in. But we also have to think about, so I don't know if the 150 is fair, because I think fairness is what we're after for two sides here.
Thank you. Councilman Y?
Matt, I have a question. As far as the 60-40 split goes, is it all alcohol, including beer and wine, or is it just the hard liquor that goes into that ratio? Would they?
So the way it's written is that 60% or more of your gross revenue has to come from food and non-alcoholic beverages.
So it's all.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Manatee?
I have two questions. One was, you know, when you were at Recon and they were talking about restaurants and wanting to come here, what do you think, I guess I'm wondering if they had any awareness of this, or what were they looking at? I mean, what was your gut feeling? They
This
didn't
had
know.
nothing to do with it.
So, okay. And I really want the people who have been working with these unlimited licenses for 27 years to understand that I do know they're part of the community, and I do know that they've contributed. Again, I do not believe these are apples to apples licenses, and I believe that you guys had the chance to spend 27 years contributing. Let's let some other people have a chance to spend 27 years contributing. And if we cut them off at the feet by establishing a restricted license that they can't even attain or get a loan for or all those other things, it's not apples to apples. And so I think that I believe we have the room for, and it was proven restaurants wanted to come here. So, and I think they would if they came here and they were successful and they unlimited liquor license came up. I believe there's a lot of them that would probably buy the unlimited liquor license. And then, you know, you guys have paved the way for a lot of good people and a lot of good restaurants. So I don't mean to take away from anything. I just want to say, let's give some other people a chance to put their sweat equity in and build their business from the scratch like you did. And I think that's what we're talking about here. So,
Okay. Are we ready for a motion? Anybody want to make a motion?
I guess I stuck my neck out a while ago and said I was ready to throw a number in there. I'll make a motion that we pass Resolution 19-25, inserting 125,000 in for the fee amount.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Councilman Danforth?
Matt, if we pass this tonight, if we look down the road, what's the methodology for changing this number in the future? Is it at a whim, every 10 years? What is it?
Right now, there is no language in statute that prevents the council from changing the fee every other week if they want to. That may.
I hope that don't happen,
But I would anticipate that there could be something forthcoming in the legislature, because there was just some work on this done last year, and I imagine now that some other communities are looking at this, there may be some other issues that have been presented. For example, the issue of whether or not licensee would get all of their money back or not if they were to fail the 60-40 test, and I imagine there might be some language in statute eventually addressing that, but there isn't currently.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Y?
So 125,000 has been proposed. What if someone else wants to propose a different amount?
You can make a motion to amend the motion. Would you like to do that, Councilman Y?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion to $100,000.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Councilman Wallem?
As I'm listening through these different conversations here, and I'm looking at, we have it at 205 right now. We haven't sold a single one. And we've talked about a fully unrestricted liquor license at 150 getting sold that went to auction. You know, my idea at least is that 150 is the high that a restricted license would be, period. And that's how you have to look at it, that if you can buy unrestricted for 150, why wouldn't you just buy that? So as we're looking at this, I don't know the correct answer. I don't know if you put a term on this for, 2 years to see if it's something that, maybe no one buys this over the next 2 years. And you can look at it again. I mean, it really comes down to is we're trying to protect the people that are out here, that are doing business and have been doing business like Julie for 40 years in our community. I don't want to hurt them to the point where they get closing the doors. Not that it's going to happen, but it is something that is a possibility, and I'm sure they have that no matter what. So we just have to look at what's best for our community. How does it affect it? Can we provide more licenses that bring more people to town? The question that, there's only so many people that go out to eat. If there's more places they go to eat, that's just what it is. So, however we look at that, whether it's 125 or, what'd you say?
100.
So, I mean, we just have to look at 150 is the top end. So if it falls somewhere in there, I'm okay with that, I guess.
All right, thank you. Matt, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to add a point of information to Mike's question. You could put a limit, a term on the resolution. I don't think you could prevent a future council from coming in the interim and changing it, but you could put a maximum amount of time that it would be set for, forcing a future council to address it at some point. Just a point of information.
Good information. Any further discussion before we act on the amendment to the motion?
So Mayor, we're at 100,000 is what's proposed, correct?
We have a motion and second to change it to, so I'll ask for action. All those in favor of amending the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Roll call, please.
Okay. So
Right.
I have Roby and Sol are recused, so hang on, I just want to mark the sheet. Okay, here we go. Albertson,
No.
Bueller. No. Danforth,
Yes.
Lallam,
Yes.
Manti. Yes. And then Thorson. Yes. Billhauer. No. And Y.
Yes.
Okay, we got 5-3. Motion passed.
Okay, so the motion is amended.
Yep, it was amended.
Is there any further discussion before I ask for action? See none? All those in favor of setting the fee at $100,000 signify by saying.
Quick question. Can we set a term on this to be reviewed?
Well, you'd have to amend the motion again.
It's already passed.
It's already passed.
Oh, okay. Well, that was just the motion. You can amend again, right?
No, you
The amendment was the amount that passed. Now we're back to the original motion. So now the motion is $100,000 with the it's 100. The motion was 125. It was amended to 100. There could be a further amendment to
You can
add
amend
it.
again
Yes, correct.
for the time limit.
to set a time limit so that we force ourselves to do this again at a certain date.
Not tomorrow.
You can do it as a council next week again if you'd like. Well, not next week, but maybe next month. Does someone want to amend the motion? All right, I'll look for action then. All those in favor of setting the fee at $100,000 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Roll call, please.
I'm gonna get really good at this. Okay, so here we go. Albertson.
No.
Bueller. Danforth.
Yes.
Lallam.
Yes.
Manti.
Yes.
Thorson.
Yes.
Okay, Billhauer.
Yes.
And Y.
Yes.
Okay. 6-2, motion carries.
All right, we've set the fee at $100,000. The next item on the agenda is number 6, approval of resolution number 19-26, expressing intent to enter into a 5-year lease agreement with Rovar LLC to operate a car rental service at the Watertown Regional Airport. So look for a motion second for approval. Moved by Lallam, second by Billhauer, and any discussion? No discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Good job.
Thanks.
Todd came all this way to.
Oh my
talk
gosh,
to you.
Todd. You waited all this time.
It's dedication.
You have people here that want to speak against it.
I did that kind of fast, didn't I? I will let people speak if I didn't realize we had people here that wanted to speak about this. Not sure what to do about it after that, but Matt will tell me, I'm sure.
You could open it up as a public comment, essentially, another public comment period, and there's no action on it tonight.
Right,
The actual lease,
right.
the action is at the next meeting. The public
Yes.
hearing will be at the next meeting as
Yes,
well.
yes. This is a memorandum of understanding that we will be taking action at a later meeting. There will be a public hearing at a later meeting, but you're welcome to comment.
Okay, so then I can come back and comment again?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I'm Charlotte McElhaney, and I'm the owner of Lake City Rentals Incorporated. I'm here with Mr. Alan Byer, and he represents Premier Auto Rental. We have both been in the auto rental business in Watertown for a long time. I've actually started renting cars in 1988 in Watertown, and I guess we have been serving not only the local independent, we're both independent rental agencies, and we have been serving not only the local community, but serving the airport at no cost. We've been to the city of Watertown. We've been providing service through some pretty horrendous times here with the airlines. I have been at the airport since the 70s, and I was there at the time. I know we had good airline service at one time before deregulation. We had north, south, and east-west runway airlines at that time, because I used to give flight instruction, and I shared the taxiways and the runways with the DC-9s and the Convair 580s. And I really feel that we have been adequately serving the public. And there have been times it's been very inconvenient. There have been canceled flights. We've had cars, reservations, and taken time to take vehicles out. And I guess I just really don't see the need for a 5-year contract with an outside company when we've been serving it for decades. And I guess that's my comment.
Did you prepare a proposal to provide service?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. I guess maybe I was a little insulted, if you come right down to it, because I have been in the business for a long time, and I thought that it was not something that was necessary. It's the airport business is not a huge part of the business. And I know that Todd has some ideas, and I really thank Todd and the Airport Commission for working so hard to get us the airline service that we have, and it's looking much more hopeful now with the not only the Denver flight, which has turned out wonderful, and now hopefully the Chicago flights will as well. But it hasn't increased, other than the fact that back in the days when the flights weren't coming in and we weren't, our rentals weren't being completed. I think Alan had the same, they had the same issues that we did. And I just think that it's, when there's local companies that have been serving it more than adequately and at no cost to the city. I guess that's just my comment.
Thank you. Councilman Y?
Charlotte, I have a question,
Yes.
and also for Alan too. So, both of you were notified that you could submit
Yes.
a proposal, and
Well, yes.
neither one of you submitted.
I was not notified, but my son happens to be on the airport commission, so I knew that there was a proposal. I was not notified personally.
And you just said you were insulted. That's why you didn't submit one.
Right. I read through the proposal, and it's what I've already been doing for 30 years.
Alan.
We was not notified at all. And I had my secretary.
Alan, can you state your name and business?
Okay, the Alan Byer, I'm Premier Auto Rental. We were never notified of it, and then I had my secretary look back in the paper. There was a little tiny article in the paper. We do not get the paper. We were never notified at all of it. And I said, his on-site, we have storage buildings. We keep everything inside, in town. We pay taxes, everything else on them storage buildings. Why would we set everything out at the airport? And we've been servicing this airport this whole time with no problems. And the national rentals, Sharps had Enterprise, held it for 3 years, and they said they got pulled. The numbers aren't there for national. And what I'm afraid of is what's going to happen here is the national's going to walk in, he's going to take the cream of the crop, close us halfway down, and we cannot recuperate again, and they'll walk off, just like they have 3 other times for Positive in town. The numbers are not there for national rental. And I'll give my income tax up if he wants to see it.
So I have a question for the attorney. If we enter into an agreement with this car rental agency, does that prohibit any other car rental agency from continuing to provide service to the airport?
Well, it doesn't prohibit, if I land at the airport, it doesn't prohibit me from calling and renting a car from one of the local businesses, is my understanding. But the issue here is that there's going to be counter space in the airport terminal that would be, basically we have room for one. Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, but.
So that was the request for proposals that we did, was for people that wanted that counter space. We can have as many auto rental dealerships or companies in town as would like to be in town, but only one can be at the airport, at the counter. But others can bring a car to the airport and, right? That's
Todd?
not prohibited? Have the airport manager answer that question.
I would like to make a comment. The walk-up rentals are almost non-existent. Our rentals are all by reservation, and we don't use the terminal at all. We have arrangements with our customers, and so the actual walk-up need at the airport, there's people just don't fly in. It's such a rare thing that they would fly in here because they know it's a small market here. And they have reservations in line before they get on the airplane.
For your service?
Yes.
And that won't change though, right?
No. We send ours via email. They sign them, send them back to us. We set the car out there, give them a key code.
Yeah, so that won't change.
Accordingly, but we were kind of hearing that the off-site ones weren't allowed to park out at the airport.
So, Airport Manager Todd Sire, you want to respond to that?
There's on-site and off-site parking or car rental.
So in our RFP, it was stated that there would be spots available in the parking lot for car rental. So if they wanted to bid on the contract or the RFP, they could store vehicles at the airport. Was part of the RFP. So they allotted 15 spots for that. And they're paying us 7% gross for that. So that is included with the 16 feet of counter space that is in the terminal.
Okay, so this isn't costing the taxpayers money to have this agreement with the one that gave us a proposal.
Other than the fact that whatever the expense is, that they're preparing a counter space there.
They will provide their own counter.
Yeah. So we're not building them a counter. The city is not building this car rental business a counter. They're building it for themselves.
This is an external company coming in to lease space from the terminal.
Okay.
Is what we're looking at it as. In the new terminal, we will have 3 or 4 spots available for car rental at the airport. If you've been to Piers Airport, it'll be very similar to that.
Okay. Councilman Vilhar?
Todd, I've got a question for you as long as you're up there. Okay, the airport board, with the exception of Les McElhaney, voted unanimously on this. Can you just summarize for us, or for me at least, what will Rovar provide for us that we're not getting currently?
Online booking. So any Expedia, Orbitz, Travelocity site, people can connect with United.com United Airlines ticket out of the airport and book it all as one package is essentially what it is. They also offer one-way drops, and we have seen an increase at the airport level anyway for one-way drops, asking about them. They're actually flying into Sioux Falls currently right now. There's a business in town that's flying into Sioux Falls due to the company's policy of car rental companies that they rent from. So there are limitations that are not being met right now.
I would like to speak to the one-way, that, you know, the one-way car rental is actually kind of a myth. The one-way car rental inquiries were because the flights were so irregular, they'd get a plane load of people here and then not be able to fly them out. And otherwise, it's such a rare thing to get a one-way car rental. People are the people that are flying into the airport are flying in and making arrangements for their cars, but when they all of a sudden fly in and they're not able to get back to their destination is when the one-way car rental inquiries all of a sudden popped up.
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Lallam?
This is more discussion for when we're going to take action on this. Can we move along to the next one, please?
Yep. There will be a public hearing, and you're welcome to come back, and that will be at the next meeting. Is that true? The July 1st meeting. So, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Todd, did you want to add anything else? Okay, thank
No.
you. Sorry I rushed through that. Item number 7 is authorization for the mayor to enter into the development agreement for the plat of Calvin Industrial First Edition. And I'll look for a motion second for approval. We have a motion by Lallam, second by Bueller, I think. And I would like Heath to explain this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if you recall, City Council had an item before them at the last meeting regarding the approval of a plat for the Calvin Industrial Park. The approval of that plat was contingent upon this development agreement being executed. The terms of the development agreement have been shared with the proprietor, which is the Watertown Development Company, and reviewed by them. And we've got a final draft in front of the City Council here this evening. To explain just a little bit further the reason behind really any development agreements that we enter into is that this stems from a requirement from the subdivision regulations, Chapter 24 of the City Code. In those regulations, no plats for any subdivision can be filed until the necessary public improvements to sustain those lots have been installed, or they've entered into a development agreement with the city that obligates them to construct these certain public improvements. Most of the times, typical public improvements would include the street, curb and gutter, storm sewer, sanitary sewer, water, and any drainage or detention necessities that are needed to sustain the development. So generally speaking, that's why we have this development agreement before the council, to coincide with the plat that was contingently approved at the last meeting for the Calvin Industrial Park. I do have a map of that area pulled up. If Ray could display my screen there. This would include, I don't know if am I zoomed in enough there for the screen? The Calvin Industrial Park generally includes this lighter green outlined area and the three lots that were included excuse me, in that plat. There's also a stretch of right-of-way that was in that plat as well, and that's generally speaking where most of the public improvements would occur. And that would be an extension of 17th Avenue, and I believe this was 28th Street that would be constructed underneath some of the terms within this development agreement. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that council might have regarding the terms.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Heath, correct me if I'm wrong, this land is actually owned 51-49% development company and city respectively, correct?
That is my understanding,
Okay.
yes.
But I know we've budgeted, and we are, and this agreement, the city is paying for the improvements, is that correct? No. Okay, how?
5149.
Okay,
I would let the mayor or Matt or perhaps
because
development company director speak to that.
Okay.
Chris Shelkin, Watertown Development Company. We are looking at doing a TIF district for that to cover the costs and doing financing on our own. So the money that was budgeted could be used for other things, but I'd only ask that you wait until we make sure our TIF district's approved and everything is good to go, but that's what we're shooting for right now to help ease the pressure off development off the city.
That was confused because we did have dollars budgeted for this project, correct?
We
Okay.
did.
Correct, but now the TIF is going to hopefully help out with this.
Yep, and we're going to be submitting TIF applications to planning and zoning as soon as we can and get the ball rolling on that.
I would like to add, this is for the most part, a very similar development agreement in every respect to all the other development agreements that go along with plats, with the exception of the sanitary sewer. And the section 3 should probably be amended to be clear, because we have two alternatives listed, and we're saying we're doing both, and we're really not doing both. We're doing B, the lots will be served by private lift stations to be installed at the time of development, to be approved by the city engineer upon a commercial site plan application. Option A is developer shall install or cause to be installed sanitary sewer and services to the property line for each lot served. And we're not really doing that, and so that could be struck from the development agreement so as not to confuse anybody. And actually, if we don't have any questions about any of the other terms, suppose we could amend the motion to include eliminating 3A from the development agreement.
Madam Mayor, I'd amend my motion to remove 3A from the development agreement.
Thank you. There's a motion by Councilman Lallam. Second by Councilwoman Manti. Any discussion on that amendment?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, just for a point of clarity for the record, the reason that 3B is being exercised on this lot is because of the nature of the gravity sewer mains that currently exist under 15th Avenue Southeast and 29th Street Southeast. These lots cannot be gravity fed to those existing sewers. There is subsequent development to the southwest of here where additional sewer main could be installed, and will also require a regional lift station to serve those lots. Pretty much any lots to the south of this area would have to be served by a regional lift station. So in this particular case, we felt it appropriate to allow these three individual lots to install and maintain their own private lift stations and to be connected to those public sanitary sewer mains in 15th Avenue.
Yes, and this property, prior to subdivision, abuts a sanitary sewer main. It's just separated from it by a pretty deep ditch and physically cannot receive gravity service from that main. So this is in the best interest of the public to do it this way. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll look for action to amend the motion. All those in favor of amending the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, is there any more discussion about the development agreement? Does anybody have any questions in general about that? Okay, I'll look for action on that. All those in favor of approving the development agreement signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 8 is old business. And for the record, Councilman Thorson had to leave, so that should be noted. Is there any old business? Councilman Solom?
Sometime back, we discussed an alley down in, just west of here, between 1st and 2nd Street, as part of the alleys that we were doing downtown, resurfacing all of them. That is the only one that's not on the schedule to resurface downtown, and we're gonna end up with one gravel alley. What is the plan with that, and where did that discussion end?
Well, our policy is that we maintain whatever surface the property owners have provided for us. We don't typically build the roads for people, and if people don't like the gravel, they can petition to have it paved, and then the city will pave it and assess that cost back to the property owners, and that's an option here. We do maintain paved surfaces to a pavement. So if you have an asphalt street, we'll repave it with asphalt. Sometimes we even upgrade it to concrete. But if it's a paved surface, we maintain the pavement. If it's a gravel surface, we maintain the gravel. And
I know the discussion was previous, that we were gonna do some research if the other property owners downtown had paid for their alleys.
Yes, I did do that research.
Did we find?
And I found no evidence that the city paved any of those for the first time around.
That they paid them?
That they paved them.
So we don't know for
the
sure.
The city, for as foreseeable as we can go back into our records, people have paid for their own hard surfacing of all roads and alleys in our community.
But even in the downtown district, we know of that?
There weren't records, it's old.
Right.
I mean, there was no evidence that we did anything differently than we do today.
Well, part of the commitment at this council when we started these alleys projects, a few years ago, that we were gonna do all the alleys within the urban renewal district. And we're putting a significant amount of time and money into downtown with various projects. One we'll be discussing tonight, which it leaves us to whole, and we're gonna end up with other areas of town like we do with the gravel and paved roads. We're gonna have one alley that's not gonna be done, and I just think it needs to be put on the list like all the other ones were, and make sure all these alleys in the urban renewal district are done. And how can we do that to get that accomplished?
Well, we've seen that come up many times, even on public streets where we would really like to see them paved. In fact, on 12th Street a few years ago, we actually put regrind down because they wanted it paved, but the property owners didn't want to pay for it. And that was a halfway point, but we haven't been paving.
So we've done all the alleys around there. We've done every alley down there, and we're gonna leave one not.
I don't know that we've got a specific plan to do all of them. We're doing as, priority the ones that municipal utilities has needs on.
The only reason the utilities are doing them is because the city made the commitment that they were gonna redo the alleys. That was part of the urban renewal.
Right, but I don't know that we made a commitment to do all. And I guess we'd have to look back and see if that was actually the commitment.
Well, that's the way it's portrayed, but
That's up to the council, and if the council wants to single out one alley that was never improved to a pavement surface and then pave it for the property owners, that's your prerogative. That it's your prerogative.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Are the streets or the alleys that we have finished paving downtown, were they pavement to start with?
Yes, they were all paved.
Okay. So we just upgraded the pavement.
Yes, we maintained the surface that was there. Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, I don't recall that we said that we were going to do all of the alleys in the urban renewal district. I think we were going to look at them on a case-by-case basis, and we continue to look at them. It could be, John, that there's an assumption that maybe that they were all paved at some point, and that's what we're doing, as the mayor indicated, a reconstruction or a maintenance on it. I certainly am not aware of which ones are gravel today, which aren't, but I don't recall that we had made a commitment to do all of them.
And it isn't
within
the
that
only
district.
unpaved alley downtown. There was a petition to pave the alley by 2nd Street Station, which didn't get done because of the price, I think, and they chose not to. But that's another one. I haven't counted them, and in conversations with municipal utilities, they told me that we have already exceeded our commitment downtown on the alleys, and I haven't checked to see what that original commitment was, but they seem to think we had a limited commitment.
All right, well, when these...
We can check on that, though.
Yeah, if we could check on that, and for future council, some of you will be around here, I won't be. When we do other alley projects, keep that in mind with the rest of them. Because I think it needs to be done along with them. We've done every other alley, and we don't know who paid for them or who didn't. And we're gonna leave one unfinished that's gonna be in close proximity to other potential downtown projects.
I believe we have the right to order it paved. Is that true? The city could pass a resolution of necessity and order it paved and assess the property owners to pay for it. That's covered by state law.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Councilman Vilhar?
As I recall, where that conversation left off a number of months ago is that we were going to take a look at where we are with our alleys in general, because I thought too there was more than just the one alley. But I remember also being because I made that suggestion, but then we had further discussion that we're also looking at the streets around town, and the feeling was that the streets probably take priority over the alleys, and that's where I recall that conversation leaving off that night a number of months ago. That the streets need to be looked at first before the alleys. Not that we were going to totally disregard the alleys, but the streets were going to get looked at first.
All right. So where are we here? Yes. Okay, just a few moments, because this council meeting is going very long. But we already had a conversation recently about this, so. Yes, you were.
My name is Mike Landsberger. I've been working on this deal for 5 years. Steve Thorson promised that they would do it for us. Has any of the other landlords in downtown Watertown have to go through this to have their alleys paved?
Everyone does. And yes, actually, the folks adjacent to 2nd Street Station went through.
Yeah,
the
they
petition.
went through that one, but that's the exception to the rule. This is the two. I've stuck a lot of money in that area, and I brought 9 new businesses to downtown Watertown. And that was the worst area of downtown, and I've cleaned it up. But you haven't put other property owners to tear up their alley and redo it. If anything, they don't even have to fight for it.
All of the alleys that we pave from gravel are paid for by the property owners.
No, you haven't proven that yet,
No,
Sarah.
I have. I mean,
How
you can
did
look
you-
back. I
where's
have
the
not found
paperwork
any
on
record
this?
where the city has
Yeah.
paved a single alley.
No, but you haven't come up with any paperwork saying that. I know what Watertown. I've lived here pretty much my whole life, except for some time in Minneapolis. But they did not originally pay for those pavings of the alleys. I can guarantee you that, or I'll make a bet with you on that.
Well,
but this is, I'm tired of you. It's like I'm jumping through hoops that nobody else has had to jump through. Like I say, who has brought 9 businesses to downtown Watertown in the last 5-6 years? Good, solid businesses, not something that had to go through a government funding.
We do appreciate that.
Well, I
Thank
don't
you
think
very
so.
much.
I don't think you do. I don't think you do. I think you're just patronizing and don't.
No, we have a petition process, and many people have followed it. There are a lot of
You
people
know,
in this town
I talked to
that
Steve
have paved their
Lanier, and
roads by petition.
Steve Lanier, I talked with him. He's open on this. He said, just let the city know, have the city contact me, and we'll go down and do it as far as the electrical. But Steve Lanier, the municipal
Steve
utility. Lanier.
Okay, municipal utilities.
But I find this is pathetic that you do everybody else's alleys. Half the alleys you dug out and took out, I would have gladly taken them in the condition they were in. That was better than what you have, mud alley.
Well, they were paved by, our process for as long
I
as.
want to see, but where's the paperwork saying that the landowners had to pay their share of that paving of the alley whenever it was done? I don't think they were paved until the 50s, maybe.
We don't show it in our records,
See,
but I can show you plenty of records of all the alleys that have been paved
That was your argument
in the last
to me.
30 years.
That
have
was
been
your
paid
argument
for
to
by
me.
the property owners.
Yeah, that was your argument to me, and that you have not proven.
Oh, I can prove that easily.
Well, when is this going to happen?
What you wanted me to show was who paid for the alleys
Yes.
that are 100 years old,
That's-
and
well,
I
no,
can't,
there-
because there were no minutes on those.
I tell you what,
There's
Sarah, I've
nothing
lived
in the
here my
record.
whole life. I know Watertown pretty good. I know what makes the town tick, and you're completely off on this, Sarah.
Okay, well, and that's very possible, and I'll just say it again. How we spend our taxpayer dollars is up to the city council.
Why are we
It's
doing
not up
some
to
of
the
these
mayor.
alleys that aren't that bad a
And
shape?
The people petition for their alleys to be paved, and once they're paved, it's up to the city to maintain that pavement.
There again, prove that that's been the heart of your argument, that they had originally paid for that.
That's
And
our process
That's the
today.
heart of the argument, but you cannot prove it. And I know
cannot
it
prove
didn't
that
happen.
That it didn't happen.
It
That's
didn't
been our
happen.
process as long as anyone has records for. So you've made your point, and I appreciate it.
No, you don't. No, you don't. This is ridiculous. I'm thoroughly disgusted that you have to jump through hoops.
You can get a couple of council members to recommend.
I'd like to have you
then we
take
can
a vote.
take action on it.
I'd like to have you take a vote on it, just see where we are
It's
at.
not on the
'Cause
agenda. We can't take action.
Can we put it on the next agenda?
Let's do that.
You find two council members that want it on the agenda, and we'll take action on it at the next meeting or
Okay.
whenever.
Yeah. All right, we'll just keep jumping through hoops. I know all those people that you redid these alleys for, they didn't jump through any hoops on this deal. This is what's disgusting, and it's pathetic, and poor leadership.
Thank you for your input. We're going to move on. Is there any other old business? Seeing none, is there any new business?
Sarah,
Councilman Albertson?
just a point of just a point, I guess, that the budget is starting to take its toll. I'm on the library board meeting and library board and the cuts, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be. We're just saying as a library board, we spent a long time discussing what is going to have to be done, and it's a major hit for the library at this point in time. Now, they do have fine money, but fine money will last this year and next year and at this rate, and the fine money will be gone. So, I think it might behoove this bunch, as much as I don't want to say we're gonna find a way to make money or raise money in the city, but if we're gonna lose $400,000, we may have to come up with a way to make 400,000 so it doesn't take these hits on, because it's not only the library. I just happen to serve on that as a liaison, and it's a tremendous hit, maybe, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's easy to say, well, just cut staff or just don't buy books or whatever, and there goes the quality of your library. Just a point. Thanks for that.
Yes, I agree. And I know the council's going to have to make some hard decisions when we do the budget. I've asked all of the departments to keep, because we're losing this big chunk of sales tax revenue, which is what supports maintaining our roads and having police and fire and all of that stuff. We're losing a big chunk of change. And we are growing with our sales tax revenue in general, but that amount that we're losing from internet access sales tax is about 1 to 3%, and we haven't completed our revenue projections yet. But just to be safe, I have asked all the departments to keep their costs flat, and that's what you're talking about, is because the cost of having employees has gone up. You have to cut something in order to keep our costs flat. We don't know that we're going to have money. I'm assuming I might have money to give back in grants to replace some of the things that people are having to cut out of their budget. But so far, Kristen's telling me I'm in the hole. Even keeping it flat, she's telling me I may need to cut another $700,000 out of the budget somewhere. And so we have a way to get around that. It's just we haven't wanted to do that in the past. We can have a stormwater utility fee like they do in virtually every other community but Watertown. We haven't wanted to do that in the past. We got close, and the mayor at the time said we're not doing this. And it was the last time we did look at that was 2008. The economy was tanking, and so maybe we should look at that again. That will be a source of revenue for us. We could do a street assessment, which could generate quite a bit of money. A lot of cities do that. We do not. We have the lowest utility rates anywhere. We can raise our utility rates and still be the lowest, but generate a little bit more revenue. Our enterprise funds can put money back into our general fund to help support us. So we do have options, and I know you're on the library board. Thank you for helping them through that. I know it's very difficult, but we're going to get through it. Any other new business? Councilman Vilhauer.
Just a comment, get out and vote tomorrow if you already haven't.
That's right. Anyone else? Councilman Lallam?
Just over this weekend, we had the Watertown JO softball. There was, I believe, around 60 teams, a lot of them from out of town that game.
Good.
So good to see a lot of people. It was a 2-day tournament, so I think a lot of those people stayed over. So
awesome.
Should have seen an uptick in people going out to eat. And
we need that.
It was long and hot, so
Yep.
just an FYI.
We need that. Thank you. Any other new business? Any liaison reports? Councilman Roby?
I just wanted to acknowledge a recent success, the Convention and Visitors Bureau. That team's done quite a few good things the last couple of years. They got both the men's and women's Final Four basketball from the North Star Athletic Conference through 2021, and they also got their volleyball Super 6 through 2020. So that's a big victory for us. I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other liaison reports? All right, we do have a need to go into executive session tonight to discuss and consult with legal counsel on contractual matters and personnel matters, and we do expect to take action upon coming out, so I'll look for a motion and second to go into executive session. Motion from Lallam. Second from Roby. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We will be taking action when we come out if anyone cares to stick around.